Welcome back to Mark Carney's book club. We are starting the third and final part of the book today. Part 3 is called Reclaiming Our Values, and we are going to be starting chapter 13, which is on values-based leadership. The first quote in this chapter is, "Reflecting on leadership and values is somewhat dangerous territory and certainly creates a target-rich environment for critics who can spot gaps between preaching and practicing." Carney says that there are countless examples of pride coming before the fall in finance, referencing those who dubbed the period before the global financial crisis as the Great Moderation. So next he's going to take us into various different leadership models. An influential early formulation by Mark Webber in 1947 identified 3 types of leaders: charismatic leaders, traditional leaders, and legal bureaucratic leaders. Webber focused more on authority than leadership, and as previous chapters have stressed, authority is not leadership, and institutional authority is not sustainable without maintaining social license or trust. He will now simplify the many different leadership models into 3 broad categories. So great person theories identify inherent traits of leaders in history and contend that they're born with those traits and, such as charisma, confidence, and intelligence, and that's what makes them effective. It is typified by influential historian Thomas Carlyle, who said, "The history of the world is but a biography of great men." Research finds that, rather than leadership being preordained, numerous factors influence the success of a particular leader, including the characteristics of the group and the situation that calls for their leadership. For these reasons, the observations in this chapter are more consistent with 2 other schools of leadership theory, behavioral and participative. So as opposed to this, the great person theories, behavioral theories of leadership contend that leaders are made, not born. And it's rooted in the idea that leadership is a process, not a gift. Behavioral theories focus on the actions of leaders, not on their mental qualities or current states. Participative leadership theories suggest the ideal leadership style draws on the input of others and focuses on the connections formed between leaders and colleagues. They encourage contributions from group members. And Carney says, "In my experience, behavioral and participative forms of leadership underscore the extent to which leadership is less about what leaders achieve themselves and more about both the sense of purpose they impart to their colleagues and the actions they catalyze in pursuit of that objective." He says that effective leadership is situational and that managerial styles should vary depending on the nature of the challenge, the context, and the people being led. Transactional leadership can also be called managerial leadership and concentrates on the achievement of specific tasks and uses rewards and punishment to motivate followers. These leaders operate within the existing systems, such as bureaucracies or large corporations, and rely on the supervision, organization, and rules and procedures. Transactional leadership is most effective in situations where problems are straightforward and can be clearly defined. Transformational leadership inspires positive changes in colleagues, organizations, and through a shared purpose, the leader themselves. Transformational leaders are generally energetic, enthusiastic, and passionate. Through the strength of their vision and personality, they inspire colleagues to change expectations, perceptions, and motivations to achieve common goals. Effective transformational leaders often possess high emotional intelligence, or emotional quotient, EQ, as an essential complement to their intelligence quotient, or IQ. He talks a bit about EQ and how it's the ability to perceive emotions both in yourself and those around you. Being a transformational leader requires a strong, positive vision of the future. It is not enough for the leaders to believe in the vision themselves. They must inspire others to buy into it. Being authentic, passionate, supportive, and trustworthy are key characteristics that will help motivate followers to support your goals for the group. Next, he's going to talk about leadership and the crisis of trust. It is fashionable to speak of the loss of trust in many societies, and longitudinal social surveys do show a general downward trend over recent decades in the public's confidence in a number of institutions. This loss of trust is often described as a disillusionment with experts, but that is overly simplistic. The population today, when asked, is in fact relatively trusting of scientific expertise, directing instead most skepticism towards government and the media. The Edelman Trust Barometer for 2020 finds that in approximately 2/3 of the countries sampled, trust in government and the media to do what is right was below 50%. Trust in the very wealthy, as discussed in Chapter 7, the financial sector is also quite low. The response to this lack of trust in institutions has been to look elsewhere. A person like yourself is now as credible as a technical expert and far more credible than a CEO or a government official, reflecting a shift in trust towards family and friends apparent on social media. Mistrust in institutions has multiple origins. Competence matters, and incompetence breeds suspicion and derision. During COVID, the pressures of providing real-time advice under enormous uncertainty led to a series of judgments that drew down the reservoir of trust in the profession. Over the course of the pandemic, scientists were encouraged to give and then forced to reverse clear advice on issues as varied as the impact on the transmission of the disease by asymptomatic patients, wearing masks, the 2-meter rule, and quarantining inbound travelers. While each of these developments can be characterized as learnings, they can also be perceived as errors, eroding confidence in the lockdown strategy and splitting the population into those who felt the threat had been overstated and those who feared that scientific advice was bending to economic and political objectives. Who needs experts when we can rely on our Facebook friends or those we follow on Twitter to validate our opinions? The mistrust of experts and expertise is being stoked by the rise of populist politics. Populism is a specific form of identity politics that makes a moral claim to represent the true people. He says trust can take ages to build and just moments to destroy. He now will take us through the 6 steps leaders can take to rebuild public trust. First is increased transparency. However, this can be ineffective in an age overwhelmed with information. The second is to establish the facts. He shares the quote, "You are entitled to your own opinion. You are not entitled to your own facts." The third is to embrace uncertainty. Rather than professing false certainty and risk being wrong, it is argued that being candid about uncertainty could build the credibility of experts over the long term. Conveying uncertainty increases the complexity of a message, something that's tough to do in 280 characters. Experts need to make judgments about no-regret communications. It is better to be accused of being too pessimistic when preparing for risks than being caught unprepared when bad things happen. As my colleague Sam Woods once said, we have been called merchants of doom, which I take as a compliment. I'm going to wrap up part 1 of chapter 13 there, and in the next part we will continue on this list of steps that leaders can take to rebuild trust. Follow along for more and let me know what you think of this chapter so far.